Hi, I'm Rochelle Gentile, president of the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra League. I'm here at the Dubuque Golf and Country Club, kicking off our virtual Soundbite series. Under normal circumstances, you'd be right here with me, enjoying a great lunch and a preview of the DSO's upcoming concert, and I'm sure you will be again soon. As you may know, the DSOL develops and administers projects, programs, and events that provide music education opportunities to folks of all ages, as well as financial support to the DSO and its youth ensemble programs. Each year, the League contributes support to youth education events and programs such as the 3rd and 5th grade Arts Trek concerts, the 4th grade Adopt a Musician program, the Youth Concerto competition, the Dubuque Symphony Youth Ensembles, and the Summer String Camp. Along with our many other endeavors is our Senior Classics program, now in its 9th year, providing performances by DSO musicians to entertain residents and their families at local nursing homes and assisted living centers. While the past year has looked a little different, we continue to focus our efforts on fundraising. We encourage and welcome you to join us in our 54th year of supporting the DSO. Please check out the DSO's website for more information about how you can get involved. We hope to see you soon, but before I go, I'd like to introduce our esteemed music director and conductor, Dr. William Intriligator.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome everyone. I'm on the stage of Five Flags Theater. Joining me is our soloist, Wes Skidgel, who is our Principal Trumpet of the Dubuque Symphony Orchestra. Welcome, Wes.
Thank you.
It's great to be with you again, and it's very nice to not be masked, and we have some restrictions being lifted, which is nice.
It's nice to be back playing orchestra concerts again, for sure.
So tell us what it's been like for you as a trumpeter during this past year and a half or so.
A lot of playing in the living room, and that's and I've always enjoyed practicing and doing my own work and everything. But I mean, you do it to get out and play with other people,
right?
And also just it's playing just in a living room all the time. You start to notice things in your sound change because you're playing in a smaller area more often by yourself. It's a lot different, playing in a concert hall, in a big orchestra, or in an orchestra. You play differently,
right?
And you can practice as much as you want by yourself and try to simulate that, but you just don't get that anywhere else. So.
Yeah, there's really no way to do that even with Zoom or anything like that.
Oh,
so,
no, yeah.
Definitely not. Well, just back up a little bit and we'll talk a little bit about where you're from, how you got started with the trumpet, where you live now and what other activities musically and otherwise you're involved in.
Well, I started trumpet in, I think, 4th grade whenever the band program started. I played piano before that. Like, I think my parents put me in a piano class when I was like in the kindergarten or something like that.
Wow.
And I don't remember why, but I always wanted to play the trumpet. I was kind of excited to start playing it because my parents said, well, you have to wait until band starts. My dad had played trumpet in high school, but I'd never heard him play, but I knew we had one in the house.
Oh.
So I remember it was kind of like I was anticipating getting to do it because I wanted to before I was like allowed to.
Right.
It's not like, they weren't mean. They weren't saying you were not allowed to play trumpet, but it's like, you should wait. And because on trumpet, you do have to wait until you have all your teeth. And if you don't, if you have your baby teeth and they fall out and you have nothing. So there is a certain, you can't start, trumpet when you're 2 like you can violin.
Right.
So
right. Yeah, there are definite limitations.
There's no Kleenex box trumpets.
Right. Yeah, or little like smaller ones that are easier somehow.
Yeah. You
like
just
that.
can't. You kind of have to wait until you at least have your adult teeth in, or most of them, at least the front ones at least.
Probably some of our, audience members have wondered. They have the Piccolo Trumpet. Why don't little kids start on that? No, it's a totally different.
Because it's harder.
It's actually harder, and it
Because
takes more probably pressure against you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up. Well, I was born in Texas, and then my family moved. My parents were from like San Diego, but I was born in Texas, and then we moved to Illinois when I was like 5 years old.
Oh, okay.
Right, 1985, right in time for the 1985 Bears.
Oh, the Bears, nice. So you've been a Chicagoan all this time? then?
Yeah. And so we lived in the Chicago area, and then I went to DePaul and studied with John Hagstrom, who's played with us a couple of times. He was in the Chicago Symphony.
Wow, so he was your professor there at
Yeah.
DePaul?
Yeah, he was.
I didn't realize that.
Uh-huh.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's where that's where I really developed my kind of orchestral ears. I tried to go just about every week to the Chicago Symphony.
Fantastic.
We would have weekly lessons. We'd have a trumpet class where the whole studio would get together and we'd do different things every week. And then we'd have orchestral excerpt class where they would plan it based on what the Chicago Symphony was doing that semester. So we would have a piece, maybe like a Bruckner Symphony or a Mahler Symphony, and we'd audition to be in the class every semester. So you'd have 4 people in the class, and then we would work on the piece, and then we would have a class where John would kind of coach us through it, and then hopefully we'd go and see the symphony play there too. And that was the idea.
Oh, that's amazing. So we forgot to mention that John is a member of the trumpet section of the Chicago Symphony, and so that's an amazing access that you had during that. Did you say your undergrad or graduate?
That was graduate school.
Graduate school.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So that was great. And then got out of school, been freelancing, taking auditions, playing here for a long time now.
It's been maybe what?
10 years, maybe.
10 or I was going to say 10 or 12 years.
Maybe longer than that. Yeah.
Well, and we've been so lucky because you're a fantastic player and an incredible musician and a great leader of the brass section, really of the orchestra. Feature of you with the Hummel Concerto is sort of like the third installment, I guess, if you will, if you count the Bach and then the hand.
Oh yeah,
Haydn, right?
Haydn, yeah. The Bach. I forgot. How could I forget about Brandenburg?
Yeah, we did Brandenburg. But a solo concerto is a kind of a different thing.
Yeah.
The Haydn Trumpet Concerto, which you did, I guess, was it 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, is that and this piece, the Hummel Trumpet Concerto, are often sort of linked in people's minds. In fact, I think some of us get them confused. They're like, we'll hear it on the radio, and we're not sure which it is, because they're sort of in the same key, they have some similarities.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what do you perceive as what's special maybe about the Hummel that we're playing, and maybe a little bit about him and the trumpeter he wrote it for?
Well, the Hummel. Well, first of all, this is a little juvenile, but my I've always gotten a kick out of his middle name, Johann Nepomuk Hummel.
Yeah, what a name!
It's probably not. It probably wasn't funny to them back then, in Vienna or wherever, but I think it's funny. So I like to always call him Johann Nepomuk Hummel.
Yes.
I think the Haydn was obviously done first, and it was, I don't know if it was the first, but it was it's definitely the first prominent trumpet concerto for the keyed trumpet. I think Leopold Mozart wrote a pretty well known for Baroque, more Baroque style.
Mm-hmm. And then there are of course many concertos in the Baroque era for a natural, or like the Baroque natural trumpet, Tartini and so many others.
But so those are all done in a very high register though, because back then the trumpet didn't have vowels or keys or anything, so you had to play really high, because the higher the overtone, or the higher you get, the closer the overtone. So you can actually play chromatics if you go high enough, without any vowels. But so the keyed trumpet was invented, and so Haydn wrote his concerto for it when he was with the Esterházys in Hungary.
And just the keys are different than what we're looking at now. These are vowels.
Those are keys, kind of like a woodwind.
Yeah, so they had keys like a woodwind instrument, and it was only a brief time of maybe about 20 years that trumpet evolved from the natural state without any kind of keys or vowels to the keyed one, and then Haydn wrote his concerto, and then 7 years later Hummel wrote his concerto. Yeah. And then about 10 or 12 years after that, the keyed ones were obsolete, and they developed the technology.
Luckily, the French stepped in and developed pistons.
Oh, I didn't realize it was French.
Yeah, it's big. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Actually,
a lot.
Arbin,
he
was a very well-known. He was famous for being, because the piston valves first were put on the cornet.
Yeah.
And he was a very one of the first famous cornet players, and he developed he was at the Paris Conservatory, and there's a whole French trumpet kind of
school.
a school because of that. So
Interesting.
But anyway, so
We were talking about Arbin because he's the
yeah.
composer of the Carnival of Venice, which
Yes.
is another great trumpet solo piece. Go
So,
ahead.
so the Hummel, so the Hummel was written for the same. So Haydn wrote his concerto for Anton Weidinger, who was in the Esterhazy Orchestra, and when Hummel took over for Haydn at the Esterhazys, they premiered this concerto on his first concert with Anton Weidinger, the same trumpet
Same
player.
trumpeter.
So they are similar in a lot of ways. I would say the Hummel kind of expands the Haydn. It's longer. I think it's more difficult. It takes more endurance. There's some like trill things that are in the Haydn that there's just more of in the Hummel.
Right.
And I think the Hummel is a little more like the second movement of the Haydn is kind of a pastoral. It's very like firmly in the classical
Yes.
kind of second movement. I think the Hummel starts to get very romantic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's starting to get. We're in the 19th century at this point.
Right.
It
This
starts,
was around 1803
Yeah.
or 1806, somewhere in there. And yeah, the harmonies are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, what he does with harmony is definitely taking, I think, the next step after Haydn and Mozart. I
Yeah.
mean, some of those key changes they would never have done.
Yeah.
In a sense, maybe there's a bit of the influence of Beethoven in the early
Yeah.
and middle period Beethoven there. But Hummel was like an incredible piano virtuoso himself, and he was
He's
a
more
great
known.
piano pedagogue.
I feel like he has a piano method that's still used today, right?
Yeah, he still has a piano method that's in use today. He was apparently a real virtuoso, a kind of child prodigy, and then as an adult he became known for his improvisation. And as you said, he took over when Haydn left the Esterhazy sort of court as their court composer after many like decades. Then Hummel stepped in,
Yeah.
and then Hummel went on from there to be in the court in Weimar. And so he was really well known and famous in his day. He was a big deal. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
almost like he was on a par with Beethoven at that time.
Yeah.
And yet now his
Sometimes
name is
just-
hardly
yeah.
known.
Well, and interestingly enough, his trumpet concerto wasn't known or was kind of lost until the 50s, 1950s, the 1950s.
Yeah, the 19th.
And the person, so it's actually kind of an interesting story how they found it. So Armando Guittala was the first trumpet player to record the Hummel trumpet concerto. He was the principal trumpet in the Boston Symphony for almost 30 years. Very well known in in the trumpet world, Armando Guittala. But he had a grad student who was studying with him in the mid-50s that actually was doing some research and found a reference sent off to there was somewhere in Great Britain had it, and so he sent off for it, and he was planning to play it on his graduate assignment, and it never came. But then several years later, it shows up after the guy's gone. So Armando Guittala took it and was like, okay, well, I'll play it, and he recorded it, and then the rest is history. Now it's in the standard repertoire for trumpet. I mean, it's
And
the
so
Haydn and the Hummel.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
wonder if when he received it from Great Britain, if it was just like written out manuscript, not even
Yeah,
published.
I'm not
parts.
sure I'm sure there's a way to find that out, but
Because there are a lot of like mistakes, and there's like a critical kind of edited edition that we're using for our concerts with the Dubuque Symphony, and even that has mistakes.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if there was like never like an officially published version in his lifetime, in Hummel's lifetime.
yeah, I don't know. And there, I feel like I think I've heard somewhere that some of how we play the second movement now weren't Hummel's original notes, and that Weidinger, like the trumpet player performed it, changed them, and they don't know whether he got permission to change those things or not.
Right.
So, but it's the same. Like the Haydn and the Hummel are very kind of like the manuscripts we have of them, or whatever are very bare bones. Like most of the slurs and stuff like that, there's almost no slur markings in it, and if they are, they're added
Right.
by the editor. So you're kind of, articulation markings and everything. You're kind of, you have a little bit of artistic freedom on what you want to do with that, because
Yeah.
no one, and there's certain notes. There's certain things in the second movement in particular. Some of the trills, how the trills are done. certain notes. Some people use flats or
Flats
naturals.
versus naturals, yeah.
Everyone plays certain things differently, and you kind of get to pick what you like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love what you're doing. I think you're bringing out a wonderful musicality and artistry in it. Your choices of those kinds of things, like your articulations, your slurs, where you're emphasizing the phrase. Yeah, even the score that I'm using, which is edited and everything. There's mistakes even in the solo trumpet part. It's missing accidentals.
Oh wow!
I know, it's really surprising.
Actually, I have an accidental. I just realized it wasn't in there today or yesterday during rehearsal.
Yeah, it's tricky,
like,
especially in the second movement, but
yeah.
even the third movement there was some in the score. Yeah. Well, would you like to play a little bit so we can hear a little bit of these three movements?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The first movement, I mean, there's, it's interesting because the Haydn has a joke written into it about because it was a keyed trumpet, everyone's anticipating like a trumpet can play a chromatic scale, and before then, all you could do was either play the tonic or play the arpeggio,
Right.
and that's what all orchestral music pretty much for the trumpet parts
Right.
are back in that day, and so he knew that everyone was anticipating it, and the first entrance on the trumpet is just you play
The notes
a
that
whole
you,
note E flat, and then you play, and it's just, and then you're responding to the orchestral trumpets. The second entrance you have with an arpeggio, and Hummel doesn't quite do that, but the first entrance is a trumpet fanfare, ba, 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 ba,
Yeah. Something
so-
that could have been done on any trumpet.
Yeah, yeah. So that we could maybe demonstrate that kind of main theme, I think.
Sure.
All right. So should I do some of the second movement or what?
Oh, maybe you could do some of the very arpeggiated stuff near the end of the first movement, if you don't mind. It's such a cool, great sound, and also that chromatic stuff at the end of the first movement would be great, just so that we can hear
Like this.
Yeah, but do you
yeah.
mind doing that? Or is that? Wonderful. So, I mean, obviously the challenges here are not the fingerings.
No,
Obviously.
no. Well, in the last
It's-
one they are.
Well, maybe in the last one they are. But here, I mean, it's incredible. You're controlling what pitch and the actual pitch of that note with just your embouchure.
Yeah.
Incredible. Wow. And so then near the end of the first movement, you want to give us an example of the advanced new chromaticism
Yeah.
that was new for that trumpet at the time. Wonderful. Gosh. So interesting.
Yeah.
So, this is maybe a silly question, but so sometimes I see you using your fingertips on your valves, and sometimes you're purposely doing this.
Yeah.
Is that just for speed, or is there some other thing that it
it's
helps
for
with?
it's for speed. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because I mean.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
So just it makes it a little easier to do the woodpecker.
Right, exactly. Well, let's talk for a second about this particular instrument. Something that many of our audience may not realize is that trumpeters play so many trumpets.
Yeah.
When we have a trumpet audition, it's not unusual for a trumpeter to come in with maybe four
Or five,
or
six,
even
yeah.
5 or 6 different trumpets. And it's, yes, they're different keys. They're in different keys. So there's a trumpet in C and the trumpet in B flat are probably the two that you will use most commonly. But this is a trumpet in E flat. And
Actually, I can.
Oh, you have the others?
I can,
You can
I can
show
show
the
you the
difference?
difference between
Yeah.
this is the normal, what I'd play in the orchestra normally, and you can kind of, you can see how much shorter.
yeah, the E flat one is definitely shorter.
And this one, the bell actually comes off. We can take the bell off.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But But yeah, and you can see, how much smaller the bell
overall.
is. So it just has a more compact sound, and
Right.
you wouldn't be able to play this as loud because it doesn't, the tubing is smaller, so you can't put as much air through it.
Right.
So this wouldn't really work. I mean, you could play it for. Sometimes people play E-flat trumpets a little bit, just if there's something really high or something to kind of help them in an orchestra spot. But you normally don't play this
Sure.
in an orchestra because you can't compete with like the trombones on this.
Right, just in terms of volume and things.
Yeah.
So when trumpeters own an E-flat, is it really just for these two concertos?
For the most part,
yeah.
yeah. Mostly it's for these two pieces.
And oftentimes at an orchestra audition, these are among the pieces that you would play as part of like a concerto, and so you'd have to bring your E-flat and then switch to a C or a B-flat. So the B-flat is even bigger, obviously.
Yeah.
And then of course there's Piccolo Trumpets, and then there's rotary trumpets where many of our audience members may have seen you perform that when we do Mozart or Haydn or Bach or Beethoven, rather. And so, it's amazing to me how many trumpets you actually have to have. As a professional.
And that's one of the challenges. Every instrument has its own challenges, but each one of these trumpets feels a little different when you have to play it. So to be able to switch between them, that's something you have to practice to know kind of how to play each one of them just right.
Yeah, right.
And to be able sometimes you have to be able to switch. And usually you don't have to switch super quickly, but in an audition you do.
Yeah.
But usually, if in an orchestra concert you're switching quickly, it's your fault because you decided to do that.
Right. Now, as a trumpeter, there's a wide range of music available to you to play, a wide range of styles, genres. And I've always been impressed that you are a dedicated orchestral trumpeter, and that you're not interested in like Dixieland or other kinds of styles. And was it an experience that you had early on playing in an orchestra that just made you fall in love with this music, or what was it?
I don't know. It's not like I don't like jazz or Dixieland or anything. I just know how difficult it is to be really great at. I know how different it is, and I feel like at some point you kind of have to pick a lane. For me, at least, because I've never been happy with just being okay at something. So yeah, I could probably be an okay jazz trumpet player if I had worked on it, but being just okay at it's not. I don't know. I'd just rather let someone else be great at it.
Yeah.
That's just I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that's not, other people shouldn't want to do that. If you're interested in multiple styles, do it. They are very different, and it's very hard to be great at both.
Right.
As far as like great trumpet players who have been great at both, I can only think of one off the top of my head, and that's Marsalis, and he even doesn't play classical anymore. He quit playing classical a long time ago.
I listened to his recording of the Haydn and Hummel like almost daily growing up. When I was, there was a certain age where I was just on the CD player.
Yeah,
I was just constantly listening to
those. Those are two of the best recordings of those.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
And now he's doing more composing than anything else,
Yeah.
and like serious or like classical composing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know you're too modest to mention this, but you have picked a lane, and you have had incredible success, and you are great as an orchestral trumpeter, and you've played many times with the Chicago Symphony, St. Louis Symphony, many others. You've been a finalist for major posts with major orchestras, and it's just a matter of time, really.
Yeah, hopefully. But yeah, I think I didn't really. In high school, I wasn't super serious about. I liked trumpet, but I was, I think I listened to mostly like Canadian brass and like Wynton Marsalis and like Rafael Mendez and like the flashy solo stuff, and I didn't really know, that's the kind of stuff I would practice. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really know too much. My parents would take me to orchestra concerts, but I never was. I wasn't really aware of some of the orchestral trumpet stuff until I got into college. There were always things that I thought were cool and I liked, and it was still, and I do recall, I was excited like going to the concert, but then, halfway through, like, okay, I'm done. But eventually something, it just kind of gets you, I feel like it just kind of gets you exposed to that language. So when there's something that is able to connect with you, you know, that you would connect with, that it finally will, because you're starting to learn the language.
Right.
So I think it is important to, you know, I think it's important to, and even if they're not going to be like classical music lovers, but it's good to know, you know, what real music is, or what good music is, or what, I think, or what live music performance is.
Right.
Because there's a lot of that's in trouble. You know, people don't appreciate certain kinds of live performance, or they don't even really understand what it is.
Right.
You know, the use of auto-tune and all that stuff. I mean, we're not, we're playing on stage, we don't have someone fixing the intonation for us in the studio. It's up to us, so.
Exactly.
So I think there's a lot of that, you know, that's being lost. I think a lot of people or there's too much musical literacy right now. So I think it is, you know, even if your kids do think it's boring at first, I think it's important to, because there will be something that they will, I mean, even if they think, you know, 90% of the concert's boring, there's going to be something they hear that's going to be interesting to them.
Yeah,
So.
and maybe even, you know, something they'll remember later.
Because I mean, look at us. I mean, we were both we were both those kids. But I mean, I appreciate that my parents took me to those.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
You want to play a little bit of the other movements, and then we'll wrap it up?
Yeah. Maybe just some of the opening.
Yeah. One of the things I like about this concerto is that there's this little kind of playful banter. The end of the second movement ends with the orchestra playing these 4 B flats. Bum, 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 and then you play ba ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum. Well, bravo, Wes, and I'm so happy to be featuring you. You bring, you know, just so much to the stage here, and we're very lucky to have you. And I think the audience is in for a real treat with this Hummel Concerto that you're presenting.
Oh well, thank you. And you know, it's always a pleasure to play live music and to play. I mean, you know, play a concerto with an orchestra. You don't get to do that very often.
I know.
And especially after, you know, all this long year of not doing anything. So it's very exciting to be able to do it. So thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. And, you know, tell your friends about this concert. It's going to be really special. We're so lucky to have Wes Skidgel in the orchestra and featuring him on this concert. Thank you again, Wes. Bravo.
Thanks.